All right, guys, you're taking a look at my daily commute home, okay? And more often than not, I'm enjoying it in one of my prized possessions. You're looking at it right here. It's a Porsche 993 Cabriolet. And what makes this a particularly interesting car is the fact that it's the last of the Porsche air-cooled engines. They stopped making those engines once they put this model to rest. Now, one of the things I enjoy doing when traffic permits is perhaps going a little bit faster than the authorities would have you do. And it's one of the joys of driving a car like this. I recently sat down, however, with a guy who drives far faster than I do on a regular basis, and he makes a rather lucrative living doing so. He's a Indy 500 champion and one of the best drivers out there on the professional circuit. So I invite you to take a look at the interview. I think you're going to enjoy a thing or two that this guy's got to share with us. Check it out.
Let's begin with your childhood in Brazil. What do you recall? What was your childhood like?
Well, growing up at home, it was a typical Brazilian family. We just remembering when I was 5 years old, Dad started it to make me watch some races on TV, Formula One races. It used to be extremely popular down there, and just every Sunday morning, we would wake up and sit down and watch racing. It's kind of like in America that people watch football. Racing there, apart from soccer, it's the second biggest sport. So by the time I was 8, by watching, growing up watching races, I was kind of wanting to do it. And I remember one day watching one race with Dad, and Senna had won that race. And I was all pumped, and I said, "Dad, do you think can I have a go-kart one day?" That day, I got my go-kart. So I think he was waiting for me to pop the question.
And that was his thing, no? That was his...
I think in a way, like every parent, you're trying to, first of all, the biggest worry we all have is how you're going to guide your kid to avoid him going to the wrong way, right? First of all, obviously, you gotta emphasize how important it is to go to school, get a right education. But I think Dad also had a vision of sports. He loved sports. He played soccer when in school for a long time, but he loved racing. Racing was his passion. I remember Dad having like cars and like street cars. They're always the hottest cars and stuff like that, that he probably found a way to, first of all, do a father and son thing over the weekend, but also try to get me on the roll of, you have to dedicate, if you want something, you're gonna have to dedicate yourself, and you're gonna have to stay away from drugs and parties and drinking and all that stuff. So I think that was his vision. But that first and foremost, I think he started with just having something to do, just the boys at home. I have a young sister and my mom, but he wanted to find something that just the two boys would do by themselves.
Little man on man.
It's a man on man, yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Now you got you got the cart the day that you asked for it.
Yeah.
But I understand it was sort of a well-kept secret.
Well, we go to the store, the go-kart, factory or store, as you call. We get this go-kart, and completely unprepared. I mean, Dad had like, a normal car where the go-kart doesn't fit, and we didn't have a truck, so we put on the top on the top of his car, tied up. And then when we were about to go home, there was two problems that we found. One was we couldn't tell my mom that, and second of all, actually the car with the go-kart on the top would not fit into the garage. So Dad says, well, let's find a race shop around here so we can leave the go-kart. So we asked the guy in the go-kart factory if he knew a mechanic that could actually keep the cart there so we could come over the weekends and just drive. So we go and we drop the cart off, on this race shop like a couple miles away from the racetrack. And we went back home pretending that nothing had happened. The following weekend, we wake up Saturday morning, Dad says, hey, I'm gonna go for a little ride with Tony. It's a boys thing. And Mom didn't make a big deal. Yeah, sure, whatever. So we're gone all day, come back, and doing that 6, 7, 8 weekends in a row, Mom started to get extremely suspicious, but in a different way. She didn't think he was doing something wrong with me. I was like probably his alibi. Mom, you know, typical Brazilian, extremely jealous and mad, thought Dad was, you know, fooling around and taking the kid as an alibi. So we had to tell her, which we talked. I think when you have some bad news to tell, if you say something worse, when you tell the truth, it doesn't sound that awful. So Mom definitely was not happy to see her 8-year-old racing go-karts and going.
But compared to the husband cheating, that certainly wasn't that
far
bad.
way better. So she was okay with it.
Turned out to be a brilliant way to break the news.
That was smart. I think that's he had all that planned. He never told me that, but you know,
Part of the plan.
I'm kind of going to use that at home every once in a while, maybe.
And you were telling me that you sort of took to it like very naturally, you know, like a fish.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
water.
I started it, and of course, the first few months, it was just like it was school. As a little kid, you're like, hey, you know, you go to school, and you tell your friends that you drive go-karts. Like, what boy doesn't like to tell about cars, right? And these kids are like, yeah, I play soccer, and I'm like, nah, I drive cars, you know, and it was just cool. So I felt that I was the coolest kid in school. Then it became something that I realized that I really wanted it to do for a living. Like, you know, it's amazing, and I feel extremely lucky that at 9 years old, you can decide that. But obviously, you know, I'm seeing people that, you know, when you're 9 years old, you want to be a cop, you want to be a firefighter, and then you grow up and you become a lawyer, you know. So, but at the time I was certain that that's what I wanted it to do, and Dad sought my determination. You know, I remember, you know, first of all, you started to win. So that talent, you can't buy talent. You can learn everything else. So I guess I was gifted for some reason that I had a pretty good talent for that. And Dad saw that and kind of like, you know, motivate me but then put me on a schedule. I remember days that as a kid, I don't remember doing anything else apart from going to school and straight to go to the go-kart track. Having to, I can't call it diet because kids don't diet, but having a healthy way of living, eating healthy foods because you can't gain weight. You have to, you know, I couldn't really go to the gym at 10 years old, but I had to be a little stronger for the go-kart. So the best way was to drive the go-karts. You have to go to bed early. And there was no parties for me. It was no, so I had to give up a lot of things. And that was the deal that he made with me. He says, that's what you want to do? Do you see those guys on TV? They all sacrifice a lot. If you wanted to be a top athlete, that doesn't come easy. So I started at sacrificing, you know, as far as I remember, I was 10 years old.
Did there ever come a point where you sort of questioned, is this too much sacrifice? I know normally teenagers, they hit a certain age.
Yeah,
you know?
well, luckily or not, Dad, you know, from 9 to 13, Dad was my sponsor, my dad, the guy that was with me in the entire time. And unfortunately, he got diagnosed with cancer when I was actually 11 years old. Between 9 and 11, we didn't know what was wrong, but the real diagnosis was, you know, when I was 11, and he lasted a couple more years, and unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13. And you know, during the years that he was ill, he actually started it to kind of, without me realizing, but preparing me for life. So we had nice talks as father and son. You know, he always says, look, if, you know, you always got to take care of your mom and sister. You know, look what you do, you're racing and you're really good at it. And so I never made a big deal about it until a Thursday. We used to race on the weekends. And a Thursday afternoon, I come back from school and Mom says, hey, Dad wants to see you. He was in the hospital, which was extremely normal. I mean, hospital became my second home. I remember the first time I walked into a hospital, I felt like, you know, it smelled like hospital, looked like hospital. After 2 years, it wasn't a big deal. So I go up and I sit on his side of the bed and we start talking. And he's like, hey, how's school? How's your day? you have a race this weekend, concentrate. Like, he was always trying to tell me stuff that, you know, don't do silly things, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, look, do you realize if something ever happens to me, you're gonna have a big responsibility, right? I'm like, yeah, I know that. You told me that a million times, you know, like a little kid. Yeah, Dad, all right, all right. And he says, look, but I'm serious. I think there are two things that I want you to do for me if something happens to me. I said, sure. So take care of your mom and sister and never stop racing, because I think you're really good at it. Would you promise me that? I said, sure. So I went home and went to bed. Next morning I woke up getting ready to go to school, and Mom is at home. And it was really weird because Mom used to stay with Dad in the hospital. I'm like, what's going on? And she sat me down and said, look, your father passed last night. And I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, I talked to the guy like we're talking it right now. It wasn't like, you know, you have this impression that, you know, you go into a coma or like, no, he was just, I think he was, I don't know, he was ready to go, or he knew something that I didn't. And I said, all right, so is everything set for the funeral and the services? And she says, yeah, your uncles and myself were, you know, we're taking care of everything. And I said, all right, well, I am going to go to school. I'm going to go to the go-kart track after that, because that's a promise that I made him. Are you okay with that? She's like, sure. And, you know, keep in mind that us Latinos, our funeral and services don't last a week like here. It's a day. You invite everybody the next day, you know, you bury the person. So I remember going to the go-kart track, and that weekend I started on the pole, and I slept in actually my mechanic's house that weekend because I couldn't go back home, you know, with all the action going on and the stuff that we had. And I won the race on Sunday. So that trophy actually still sits in my mom's house on my dad's bedside until this day. So back to what you were saying, you know, it was, no, I think I was lucky enough that with that promise, I had to keep it. So that's why I'm still here.
There's no going back?
No, I had no choice.
I sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, your connection to racing sort of keeps you connected to the memory of your father today, no?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you think about it, I mean, your childhood, I mean, I was 13 when I lost him, but up until you were, I think, 5, 6 years old, you don't remember much of your parents or anything. You're just a kid, right? So I really connected to my dad from 7 to 13, especially because all he did was go race with me and watching races with me. And so, yeah, you know, I don't know how different, I get that question asked all the time, my entire career was, what about if he was alive? You know, well, so many things could have been different, I don't know. But yeah, it keeps me connected, it keeps his memory alive, you know, and every success, every race that I win, I didn't realize that until somebody pointed out, but I've never actually, you know, when you win a race or when you win something, people actually celebrate with your fist up. I'm always pointing up, and I didn't realize that, really. Somebody the other day, I was like, that's true. Every time I would just go, so, and that's like, I'm doing it, keeping in my promise. So yeah, that's probably the best way that I could describe that, how connected I am to my dad.
Oh, beautiful. Now, as the father of 2 sons, what lessons did you take from your father that you're looking forward to passing on to them, would you say?
Well, I think this lesson number 1 is to spend time with them, because life is too short. You know, I think Dad was 40 years old when he died, which is actually my age right now. And I can't imagine leaving my kids right now, you know. It's almost exactly the same age my oldest son, well, 4 years apart. But so the lesson number 1 is to enjoy your kids. You know, it's easy to, especially with what I do, it's a very selfish sport. It takes a lot of time and takes a lot of myself. Not just, people just think you just go race on the weekends and you come home, but you have workouts to do, you have interviews, you have so many other things that involved for you to be 100% committed to do that. A part of, let alone that every time you jump in the race car, you don't know what's going to happen to you, so you have to be extremely strong in the head. So lesson number one, to enjoy them as much as I can. Lesson number two, I would say, try to keep them in a path, whatever that is. I don't know if I want my kids to race, but that's a very selfish decision of mine. Of course, if they decide to do that, I'm going to have to support them. But, you know, trying to have them focus on the good things, and, you know, and especially nowadays, because we come from a generation that, you know, a lot of the temptations weren't there. Today you don't have to leave the house to communicate with the entire world or to get in trouble. So that's my biggest challenge that I have, is how am I going to keep my kids kind of an old school, the way we grew up, you know, valuing the family, valuing to stay, because nowadays you see kids, they can't wait to leave their parents home, and, you know, we don't do that. I mean, well, it's Latinos, it's like we live in our house, we only leave the house when we get married. So that's definitely what I envision, having my kids close to me and focus on having a goal, whatever that is. I don't mind, you know, whatever profession they want to be. If they don't want to be anywhere near or involved in sports, I wouldn't mind, as long as they're happy.
That's great. Let's get into your immigrant experience a little bit. When did it become apparent that you were leaving Brazil and coming to live in the U.S.?
Actually, I'm going to go back. Before I came to the U.S., I went to Europe to race in Italy. And that was probably one of the hardest or the biggest shock I've ever had, as far as feeling like you don't belong. I remember landing there in 1993. I lived in a race shop for 3 years. I didn't have money I couldn't afford to rent a house, so the team that I was racing offered me to, like, I could just stay there. So I remember my room was my boss's office. After 6 p.m. was my bedroom, and then 7 a.m. I had to get out. I had a bed, a mattress on the floor with a TV, and so I started winning a lot of races. And it was in 1994 I entered a championship that if you win the championship, you had to win the championship, you had $100,000 in prize money, and you could move up a ladder to a bigger series, which was a Formula 3, which is a nice car and really close to go do Formula 1. And I start the second race of the year. I won the first race, I won the second race. I was the only immigrant in the series. It was 23 drivers. It was 22 Italians and myself. I remember I was 17 years old. And at the end of the second race, they approached me and they said, look, we have a big problem. They want to ban you from racing here. I said, what did I do? He says, well, all the dads made a movement and collect signatures saying that it's not fair that a Brazilian guy is coming here and stealing the money from the future Italians. So, of course, it didn't go very well with me, but it didn't happen. I won 11 out of the 15 races, and I took their money. Anyway, the bloody Brazilian took their money and left.